The rain began before dusk, quiet at first. A whisper, crawling down the eaves, then growing until it roared like the sea. Hours passed before the first knock came. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut through the storm. 3 precise taps, spaced evenly apart, from the window nearest the bed. I froze. The sound didn't belong to wind or rain. Then came another, softer, more deliberate, almost polite, almost waiting. Every flicker of the candle threw shapes that seemed to move when I blinked. The room smelled of wet wood and burned wax. The air felt swollen with something that shouldn't be inside. I told myself it was a branch, maybe debris from the storm, until the next knock followed a breath. A fog of air on the glass, where no one should be standing. I leaned closer, pulse hammering in rhythm with the rain, and watched a handprint bloom on the other side of the window, pressing slow and steady, as if asking to be let in. The silence afterward was worse than the noise. The rain pressed against the walls, but the knocking had stopped, leaving a gap too deep to breathe. I stepped closer to the window, heart pacing in my throat. Outside, nothing moved. The forest swayed, but every tree stood where it always had. Still, the air felt crowded. Behind me, the candle hissed as though someone had breathed too close. The smell of damp earth crept through the cracks. I whispered into the darkness, hoping the sound of my own voice would make it smaller. No one answered. Just the steady sigh of rain, the faint ticking of water dripping through the ceiling. Then, another sound. Not from the window this time, but from the floorboards beneath my feet. A slow, deliberate creak that rose from directly below. The old man stirred, his chair creaking louder than the storm. His voice cracked like dry wood, whispering that no one should open the window after midnight. Not here. Not during the rain. He said the forest doesn't knock unless it remembers a face. I wanted to laugh, but my throat wouldn't let me. The air trembled with thunder, and the candle went out as if the storm had swallowed it whole. Darkness surged through the room, pressing on every wall at once. The old man's breathing turned ragged. I reached for another match, and froze when the window flashed white. Not from lightning this time, from inside. Something gleamed against the glass, a light too steady to be a reflection. The light faded, leaving only the whisper of rain. I felt the house exhale, a long, low groan from the beams overhead. The floor shifted underfoot, as if something heavy moved beneath. I wanted to call out, but the old man's hand gripped my arm, trembling. He pointed to the door. Not the window, not the floor, the door. I listened. Beyond it, footsteps, soft, soaked, deliberate. 1, 2, 3, stopping right outside. The knob shivered as if touched by cold metal. Then the voice came, muffled, low, uncertain. It sounded like mine. The same tone, the same pause between words. Thunder broke again, louder than before, shaking dust from the rafters. The door bent inward, straining against the latch. My reflection in the window moved even when I didn't, smiling faintly, blinking out of rhythm. I backed away until I felt the old man's breath beside me. "It always finds the one who listens," he whispered, voice hollow. A new knock came. Not from the window or the door, but from inside the walls. A steady rhythm, spreading, moving closer with each echo. The candle reignited on its own, flame bending toward the window. Through the glass, the forest stood still, too still, as though holding its breath for what came next. The rain never eased, only changed its rhythm, slower, heavier, like something breathing beneath the storm. The old man had fallen silent, eyes fixed on the floorboards that groaned in response to the thunder. I pressed my ear against the wood, hearing faint murmurs beneath it. Not words, but shapes of words, half-formed and slipping between raindrops. I pulled back when something brushed the underside, soft as fingertips. The cottage smelled of rot now, like wet leaves buried too long. Every shadow stretched toward the window, bending as if drawn by the unseen thing outside. I whispered again into the dark, hoping for silence, but instead the whispers answered. Dozens of them, layered like overlapping breaths, all speaking in my voice. We lifted one of the planks. Beneath it lay darkness that didn't belong to the ground. Thick, oily, breathing. The air poured out, heavy with the scent of wet ash. Something shifted inside it, just beyond reach, dragging wood and stone with slow determination. The lantern flame leaned toward the opening, like it wanted to look, too. I almost dropped it when a face blinked in the blackness. Pale eyes, perfectly still, staring up from beneath the floor. They were waiting. They were waiting. The old man whispered a name I didn't recognize and stumbled back, clutching his chest. I leaned closer, unable to stop. The face smiled, and in that instant, the rain outside stopped completely. Silence settled over everything. Thick and wrong. Without the rain, the world outside vanished. No sound, no wind, no pulse. Only the faint heartbeat from under the floor. The face was gone now, replaced by a small object pushing through the soil. I reached for it, my fingers trembling. It was cold metal, a locket, old and rusted. Its chain still slick with something darker than water. I opened it. Inside were two faces. Mine, and the man from the window. The old man whispered that he'd seen that locket buried years ago, the night the forest took someone who knocked to be let in. I dropped it, but the locket didn't fall. It hovered, turning slowly in the still air, as though listening. The stillness shattered. Every window blew inward at once, glass spraying across the room like frozen rain. Wind howled through the open frames, though no storm remained outside. The candlelight twisted into thin white strands that crawled toward the open floor. I tried to move, but the air grew heavy, pressing down like invisible hands. The whispers returned, louder now, taking the shape of my name. The old man shouted something, voice lost in the roar. Then he was gone, not falling, not taken, just gone. Replaced by the faint shimmer of his outline fading where he had stood. The floorboards beneath me pulsed once, then split open in a single breath, revealing stairs that hadn't been there before. I stood at the edge of the opening, staring down into the dark passage below. The rain had returned, but now it fell upward, vanishing into the cracks above the ceiling. I could still hear the knocking, faint but rhythmic, coming from deep beneath the stairs. My reflection in the remaining shards of glass no longer matched me. It stood still while I breathed. I took one step down, then another. The air grew colder, thicker, full of the smell of soil and iron. Somewhere below, a light moved, swaying gently like a lantern carried by unseen hands. I whispered, "Who's there?" The answer came softly, my own voice saying, "You are." The stairs creaked under each step, but the sound came from above, not below. It felt as though the house were walking with me, descending into the dark. My candle flickered, stretching my shadow across the damp walls that pulsed like skin. The air was warm at first, then cold enough to bite. The light ahead, the one that had called me, kept swaying deeper, moving at the same pace as my heartbeat. Every few steps I thought I heard another set of footsteps behind me, just out of sync. When I turned, the staircase above was gone, replaced by a solid ceiling of wood. There was no going back now, only forward. The air smelled of rain and iron, and faintly of breath. The corridor at the bottom was lined with doors, each made of rotting wood, each with a name carved into it. None of them were mine, yet I knew them. The names whispered when I passed, voices matching the knocks from the window. I stopped at the last door, where the carving had been scratched away, the wood still wet as if freshly marked. Behind it came a sound I recognized, the steady hum of rain. I pressed my ear against the door and heard faint laughter, childlike, echoing beneath the storm. My hand found the handle on its own. It was cold. I turned it. The door opened into light so bright it made the candle vanish. I stepped through and found myself outside, or what looked like outside. The forest stood under a gray sky, motionless, every drop of rain frozen midair. Trees leaned in unnatural stillness, their leaves suspended like glass. The world had stopped breathing. In the clearing ahead stood the 34-year-old man from the window, perfectly dry, his expression calm. He lifted a hand, and all the suspended rain shifted toward him, forming a halo that shimmered faintly in the air. "You heard me knocking," he said, voice too even. "Now you have to let it in." I tried to speak, but the sound of my voice shattered like glass against the frozen silence. He stepped closer, each movement sending ripples through the frozen world, as if reality bent around him. "You kept the window shut," he said softly, "so it found another way." His shadow stretched long behind me, though there was no light to cast it. I backed away, but the ground beneath me shifted, turning from soil to floorboards. The forest began to dissolve, trees peeling like paper to reveal the walls of my cottage again. The sound of rain returned, not outside, but from within the walls, pouring between the boards, running like veins. I turned toward the window. It was open now, curtains billowing inward, though the air was still. The old man's chair was back where it had always been, empty but rocking gently. The hole in the floor was gone, replaced by smooth wood that gleamed with water. I felt the locket against my neck, though I'd never put it on. The knocking returned. This time soft, patient, coming from the mirror across the room. I turned slowly. My reflection stood there, watching. But it wasn't waiting to mimic me anymore. It raised its hand and knocked again. Once, twice, 3 times, before smiling that same impossible smile I'd seen in the glass before. The storm outside began again, louder than ever, and the lights inside all went out. The mirror fogged over, though the room had gone cold. I wiped the surface, and my reflection didn't move. It stood still, eyes wide, smile, faint and waiting. A faint tapping started again. Not from the window, not from the walls, but from inside the glass. My breath came out in white puffs as the reflection leaned forward on its own. It mouthed something I couldn't hear, then knocked 3 times. The sound echoed through the cottage, shaking dust from the ceiling. I stepped back, heart pounding, and watched as cracks spread through the mirror like veins of light. From behind the glass came the sound of rain, though outside had fallen silent. I whispered, "What are you?" The reflection tilted its head, the smile widening. Then my voice came from its mouth. "I'm what answered." The cracks deepened until the mirror began to ripple, turning fluid and bright, like a sheet of mercury. Through its surface I saw not my own face, but the cottage reflected from another angle. The same room, same furniture, but everything reversed. The fire burned blue. The rocking chair moved, though no one sat in it. My reflection stepped backward, deeper into that inverted room, and behind it stood the 34-year-old man. His hand rested on her shoulder. His lips moved, but the voice came from all around me. "You opened the wrong side," it said. The mirror began to hum, low and deep, a sound that felt like pressure in my bones. I reached toward it, and my reflection reached back. The instant our fingertips met, the glass shattered inward. The shards didn't fall. They hovered midair, spinning slowly, each reflecting a different scene from my cottage. In one, the old man sat by the fire. In another, the boy from the forest knocked on the window. Each reflection moved, alive in its own silence. The shards drifted closer, circling me. Every surface showed me doing something I hadn't done yet. Opening the door, lighting another candle, walking into the woods. When I turned, the reflection was gone, replaced by the 34-year-old man standing in my place inside the mirror's frame. He looked calm, almost kind, and whispered, "You belong on this side now." The air turned heavy again, pressing against my lungs. The room stretched, walls bending and folding like pages turning backward. The rain returned outside, but this time the sound came in reverse, droplets rising instead of falling. I stumbled toward the window, desperate for air, but the view beyond had changed. The forest was gone. In its place stood a sea of mirrors, each one showing the cottage from a slightly different night, each one with a different version of me staring back. I touched the window, and the glass rippled like water. My reflection in the nearest mirror blinked once, then began to walk toward me from the other side. The sound of knocking returned. Hundreds of knocks, overlapping, coming from every mirror at once. My name echoed from within them, a chorus of voices that all sounded like me. The floor vibrated, the air humming with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I tried to shout, but the noise swallowed my voice. One mirror shattered, then another, until only one remained, the one before me. In its depths, the 34-year-old man and my reflection stood together, holding the locket between them. They looked at me, waiting. When they opened their hands, the locket fell, not into their world, but through the glass, landing at my feet. It was warm. And when I opened it this time, the third picture inside was still forming, my own, but smiling. The storm outside had become soundless, a flickering pulse of light instead of thunder. Every flash illuminated the walls as though the cottage itself had veins beneath its wood. I picked up the locket. It burned faintly in my palm, not from heat, but from something alive inside. The reflection in the last standing mirror didn't move this time. It simply watched. Behind it, the 34-year-old man whispered to it, and though I couldn't hear the words, I knew they were meant for me. The candle beside me guttered out, yet the room stayed lit from within the wood. I could hear the heartbeat again, not from below, but from the walls around me. The knocks had become slower now, patient, almost fond. The cottage wasn't trying to scare me anymore. It was trying to remember me. The old man's voice returned first, distant, broken, carried on the wind that no longer belonged outside. "Don't let it finish your name," he said. I looked around, but the chair was empty. His shadow lingered faintly against the far wall, moving on its own. I clutched the locket tighter. It pulsed once, then opened without my touch. The three faces inside stared up at me. Mine, the man's, and the faint outline of a fourth, blurred as though the picture wasn't done being taken. From somewhere deep in the floor came a long, dragging sound, wood splitting and nails bending, as if the cottage were turning itself inside out to listen. I whispered, "What do you want?" The reflection smiled. "You." The mirror began to breathe. Each inhale fogged the glass from inside, each exhale cleared it. I stepped closer, drawn by the rhythm that matched my own lungs. The reflection mouthed my words a half-second before I spoke them, predicting rather than mimicking. The man behind it stood motionless, eyes open but blank, his hand resting on the reflection's shoulder. I reached for the glass again, and this time it didn't ripple. It felt solid, cold, alive. A heartbeat thudded behind it, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was mine. Then, slowly, the reflection raised its hand and placed it where mine met the glass. The wood around me sighed, and every candle in the house flared to life. The room shuddered as the candle's flames turned blue, Their light stretched like roots crawling up the walls and ceiling, connecting in glowing veins that pulsed with every beat of my heart. The house groaned, boards shifting and sighing like something waking from a long sleep. My reflection began to fade, replaced by my own face from a moment ago, repeating my movements a second behind. I backed away, but my reflection kept coming, stepping through the mirror with fluid motion, her feet leaving wet prints on the floor. She looked at me with my eyes, and behind her, the mirror showed only black. "It's your turn," she whispered, voice perfectly calm. "Someone has to stay to keep the rain from stopping." The reflection stood inches from me, dripping rain onto the dry floor. She smiled without warmth, reaching up to brush hair from my face. "The knocking never ends," she said softly. "It just changes sides." Behind her, the 34-year-old man watched silently, eyes glinting like wet stone. I looked down at the locket still pulsing in my palm. When I opened it, the fourth picture was complete. Her face identical to mine, smiling wider than I could. The walls around us began to hum, the rhythm matching the knocks that had started again, slow and steady. She took my hand, guiding it toward the mirror's edge. "The rain is waiting," she said. I didn't resist. As she stepped backward into the darkness, she pulled me with her, and for the first time that night, the knocking stopped. When I opened my eyes, the air felt heavier, thick like fog, but moving as if it breathed. The ground beneath me wasn't wood or earth, but something smooth that rippled when touched. I looked back for the mirror, but there was only darkness stretching in every direction. The sound of rain was near yet distant, as though falling inside the sky instead of from it. A faint glow pulsed ahead, the same color as the candlelight that once lived in the cottage walls. I walked toward it, and with each step, echoes followed. Soft, uneven, not quite matching mine. I stopped, the echoes didn't. They moved closer, until I saw shapes in the fog, outlines of doors, dozens of them, suspended in the air, each one faintly humming with my own heartbeat. The first door opened on its own. Behind it, I saw the cottage again, but it wasn't mine. The window was open, and a woman who looked like me stood inside, smiling as though she'd been expecting someone. She raised a hand and knocked 3 times on the glass. I stepped closer, watching her lips form silent words I couldn't hear. Behind her, the 34-year-old man passed through the room, glancing at me only once before vanishing into shadow. When I blinked, the door was gone, leaving only mist. The sound of knocking echoed faintly through the fog. It wasn't coming from the doors anymore. It was coming from the ground beneath my feet. The light ahead grew stronger, but it moved, sliding slowly across the horizon like something watching. Every time it pulsed, the doors shifted position, closing one by one until only a single one remained in front of me. Its surface shimmered like water. Through it, I saw the boy from the forest, his face calm now, his eyes reflecting endless rain. He whispered something that sounded like my name, then pointed upward. Above us, the sky itself was made of glass, and behind it, I could see the other world. My world, dripping upside down, the cottage floating there like a reflection waiting to be touched. I felt the pull again, gentle but deep, as though the air itself wanted to trade places. I reached for the last door. The surface rippled, spreading concentric circles of light. My reflection appeared within them, standing beside the 34-year-old man. They looked at each other, then at me, like a memory deciding whether to continue. The air around me vibrated softly, filled with whispers repeating one word: return. I hesitated, unsure which side of the glass I belonged to anymore. The reflection smiled and mouthed the same phrase I had once said in fear: "If the rain stops, we disappear." I understood then. The knocking wasn't a warning. It was a reminder. The rain was never meant to end. I stepped forward, and the world folded inward, everything bending toward the sound of water. When I opened my eyes again, the rain was steady, soft, and endless. I was back inside the cottage, or one of them. The mirror stood whole on the far wall, its surface dark but alive with motion beneath. The locket lay on the table, still open, showing 4 faces that shifted slightly as if breathing. I listened. Somewhere beyond the forest, beyond the storm, came the faintest tapping on glass. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move this time. I just watched the window, knowing someone else now stood on the other side, waiting, listening, asking to be remembered. And when I finally whispered, "Come in," the rain didn't stop. It simply started again from both sides of the glass. Orr, true, ain, ow, cow. The rain sang against the window again, steady and endless, as if the sky had found its rhythm at last. The candle beside me burned without melting, its flame motionless in the still air. The mirror no longer showed my reflection. It showed the room as it might be, moments ahead of now. The rocking chair moved before I touched it. The locket on the table closed itself. Each echo came a heartbeat too early. I felt calm, almost peaceful. But the silence beneath the rain carried a strange pulse. Somewhere behind the walls, something breathed, not loud, not threatening, just steady, in time with the rain. When I blinked, the reflection blinked late. I smiled to test it. The mirror smiled first. The mirror brightened until it looked like a doorway again. Through it, I saw the other version of the cottage, darker, quieter, lit only by pale light from nowhere. My reflection stood there, wearing the same clothes, holding the same locket. She lifted it toward me, revealing that the faces inside no longer shifted. All 4 were still, complete. She mouthed a word I couldn't hear, but I knew it. Stay. The air around me shimmered like heat, and the window fogged from the inside. I could see her reaching forward, her hand pressing against the glass from her side. My fingers tingled, as if remembering a touch that hadn't happened yet. The house began to hum again, low, deep, resonant, like a heartbeat beneath the rain. The floor rippled once, and the walls seemed to breathe inward. The reflection's eyes flickered, changing from blue to gray, and back again. "The rain remembers us," she said. And this time I heard it aloud, her voice matching mine perfectly. "But it forgets which side we belong to." Behind her, the 34-year-old man stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. The boy appeared beside them, silent, watching. The mirror rippled between us, the worlds thinning to a single surface. I realized then that the knocking would never stop. Not because something wanted in, but because something needed out. I stepped closer, close enough to see my reflection's breath fog the mirror. The air was warm, almost kind. Behind her, the rain was falling backward again, rising into the sky like memory returning home. "You can rest now," she whispered. "The house will remember for you." The heartbeat in the walls slowed, fading into the rhythm of the rain. My hand met hers on the glass, and for the first time, there was no cold between us. The mirror softened, turning fluid under my touch. I didn't know which side was mine anymore, but maybe that was the point. I closed my eyes, and the sound of the rain became everything. When the light faded, the mirror was gone. Only the rain remained, gentle, endless, and quiet. The cottage stood still, every object in its perfect place. The chair, the table, the window. And on the table lay the locket, closed, and still warm. I sat by the window, listening, waiting for the next knock. But there was none. The storm had settled into a steady whisper, soft as breathing. Somewhere far away, another version of this room might still be waiting for an answer. But here now, the rain kept falling, patient, eternal. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of it. I simply let it fall.